I'm Natalie Kenway, Global Head of ESG Insights at ESG Clarity, and welcome to The Green Dream, video series where we speak to senior members of the responsible investment industry. Today, I'm joined by Angus Parker, Manager of the HSBC Global Equity Climate Change Fund. Hi, Angus, thank you very much for joining me.
Hi.
First of all, can you give us an overview of the fund? When was it launched, what it invests in, and where can it sit in advisor portfolios?
Yes, I mean, climate change is it's the ultimate megatrend. It really presents an existential threat and therefore has very significant investment implications both today and into the future. I mean, it clearly transcends national boundaries, but also transcends normal timescales. And today, countries, companies, communities, consumers are all demanding transformational change. And unlike our ancestors, today we're all aware of the sources of climate change, where those greenhouse gases come from, and we're also aware of the solutions that we can address and use to challenge this daunting thing we're all facing. So this fund is really focused on the successful energy transition, decarbonization process. So we want to try and identify individual companies that can participate in those solutions, but at the same time, they're also exhibiting lower carbon intensity than the broader global equity market and having a higher ESG score. So it's not just about swapping out fossil fuels. I mean, what we're talking about is really a change from business as usual. We're talking about a wholesale transformation and rewiring of the global economy. And so that's what this fund is designed to do. It's worth remembering, of course, that climate change stems from many diverse sources. So the solution's got to come from different sources as well. Of course, we'll need to think about energy production, but we'll also need to think about industrial processes, the whole kind of value chain around food, land and agriculture, building and construction, but also transportation. It's quite sobering, I think, to think that a child born today, compared to their grandparents, will have to exist on a carbon budget, if you like, about an eighth of what their grandparents existed on. So this fund used to be a benchmark-driven fund. It was sitting there, not really gathering any assets and not really appealing to clients. So in 2016, we began to reposition it away from that benchmark anchoring and to be a pure thematic implementation. So I think today it's suitable as a kind of sleeve of someone's global equity exposure. You could add it in there. I think you've got to think about it as a long-term investment. Let those themes really drive the returns, and obviously let the compounding effect, as we all know, is so powerful for equities.
Okay, great, thank you. And I understand the fund has quite high exposure to Asia. Can you talk about the opportunities that you're finding there?
Yeah, I mean, the fund is built from a bottom-up perspective. So the resultant kind of weightings in different geographies are just residuals. But you're right, it is overweight in Asia. I mean, obviously, the historic atmospheric gases, greenhouse gases that exist came from Europe and the US. They were first into the Industrial Revolution. But today, the incremental pollution is happening in Asia. I mean, we have an expression we use, following the tons, and we mean carbon dioxide tons. So if you can think about the big population centers in India and China, Indonesia, and so on, this is where the really big commercial opportunities are going to exist from finding solutions to climate change. And so there are really interesting technologies being developed and opportunities to invest in different companies there. I don't know if you saw the Bloomberg magazine article recently that talked about the top 15 billionaires who had made their money out of green businesses. 14 out of the top 15 came from Asia. I think only Elon Musk was in there from ex-Asia. So there are opportunities in the solar business. There are opportunities in the nascent hydrogen business. There are opportunities in building materials, in looking at new solutions in the kind of recycling, energy efficiency space. I mean, as I said, it's not just about swapping out fossil fuels. It's affecting the whole range of different companies. And Asia is being very quick to address some of these. We're all familiar with some of the pollution problems, for example, in China and what that's meant. So, of course, on the one hand, they've still got lots of coal-powered generation, but they're also at the forefront of generating, big solar businesses and constructing wind farms and producing materials for those kind of services.
Great. Yes, I'm definitely hearing more and more about the companies in Asia and the wind and solar opportunities there. And moving on to the US, I understand the fund is underweight there, which I guess for a global fund is quite surprising, but then from a climate change perspective might not be that surprising. Can you just explain that?
Yeah, as I said, we build the portfolio from a bottom-up perspective, so it's just a residual. But of course, it would have been great to have been overweight the US over the last 3 years. It's been the best performing market, but the fund has performed without being overweight. I mean, I think, who knows what Joe Biden will be able to push through with his stimulus package, how much the Senate are going to allow him to divert investment into infrastructure spending. And of course, the US is a real hub of innovation. I listened to an interesting talk the other day by Bill Gates, and he said, the world needs the innovation power of America. And he's right. So hopefully there will be some solutions that get, brought to scale and can really make a material difference from the US. But, the incremental pollution is coming from Asia. And along with Asia, Europe is at the forefront of finding opportunities. They're very advanced in working on taxonomies, in moving regulation forward apace. And they should be setting an example and spreading their influence across the world. Hopefully we'll see that when it comes to the COP26 in Glasgow, that Europe again will lead, and particularly obviously the UK as the host with Glasgow as the base. Yeah.
Great. And you touched on Europe there. Can you explain some of the themes that you're investing in that region?
Yeah, so the themes in Europe again are pretty varied. We have these 9 sub-themes we use to sort of access that energy transition and decarbonisation process we want to go through. So every single stock we hold addresses one of these sub-themes. So one of the sub-themes clearly is energy efficiency. So there are names that are focused on sort of improving the electrification process of buildings, helping us move to more of an electric economy. Obviously, we need to generate the energy from a renewable source, but we also need to use it efficiently. Then there are companies, there's a German company, for example, that focuses on power semiconductors for the EV industry, making sure that electric vehicles use their battery power efficiently. Obviously, being based in Germany is attractive. You've got those big auto manufacturers on their front door, but this is a company that is at the forefront of its industry. There is also companies addressing waste. Waste prevention is a big opportunity in the climate change space. A third of all food produced today is wasted, which is a absolute travesty if you think about the cost and the emissions that are involved there. So if you can stop people in the developed world, particularly wasting food, then that's very attractive. So there's some companies that are developing meal kits. You may have seen the adverts on the TV for them. We also have opportunities for the sort of infrastructure that surrounds renewable energy. It's not good enough just to put up a wind farm or a solar array. You need to intelligently connect it into the grid. And that obviously becomes more complicated if you put the wind farm offshore, for example. So there are people that are providing the kind of, if you like, the picks and shovels to the climate change industry. And often those are more attractive because you're not necessarily having to choose between winners and losers, but you can provide the people that make the components. And then finally, buildings is obviously a huge area. It accounts for about 15% of the source of greenhouse gases. And there are companies in Europe focused on insulation materials. Attractively, they can source some of the materials they use for the insulation as recycled materials. So that can be very appealing as well. So you can see just a few examples. There's quite a wide spread, and we really are talking about a wholesale rewiring of the global economy, not just Xing out fossil fuels and thinking we've done the job. It's going to be a multi-generational challenge.
It sure is. I completely agree. And how has COVID-19 impacted interest in the portfolio?
Well, I think there's been more interest in all these types of portfolio. And I think more widely, COVID has provided a kind of pause, hasn't it, for all of us to reflect on our relationship with the world and each other. And concerns were already mounting before COVID, but have just been amplified around environmental degradation, around growing inequality, around sort of lack of trust in capitalism. So I think what this period of maybe people being more at home, but reflecting more on the environment we live and work in has done is to think about the last few years and how the world has worked. I mean, there's been a big focus on short-term profit maximization by most companies, and management have been incentivized in line with that. But we all know that has come at some costs. And now I think there's a much greater recognition that companies don't exist in a vacuum, that they are surrounded by a whole series of stakeholders, and if those stakeholders' interests aren't appropriately balanced out, then there's a problem. They won't have enduring franchises that their customers and suppliers and employees are proud of. So I think it's really opened the can of stakeholder interest in a much more fundamental way, and I think that's only a good thing. It will make companies behave in a better way. We needed something of a reset. We obviously would wish it hadn't happened like this, but I think there's some good to come out of it.
Thank you. And how do you expect companies to respond to climate change over the next 5 years, and what would you like to see?
Well, I think I'm pretty optimistic in what I'm seeing already. I think countries and companies and consumers are all recognizing the need for change, and so those different components are putting pressure on each other to push things forward. And I think what we see when we engage with companies, which is core part of our kind of investment process, is that companies are absolutely willing to listen. They're willing to listen to the sharing of best practice. They're willing to listen to kind of collective engagements that I'm doing with some other fund management groups. We're part, for example, of the Climate 100 Plus initiative, focus on those big emitters and really trying to engage with them and help them develop. We also want companies to be brave to articulate their intentions, because I think if companies are clear about what they're intending, then I think investors are more accommodating to the inevitable execution challenges. I think there's it's not easy for companies. They've got so many different forces of different types of shareholder, but hopefully if they can appeal to the right type of shareholder, they'll get the support that is warranted. So I'm pretty optimistic. I think the solutions exist. They just need to be executed, and that's not an easy thing to do. But I think if investors on the one hand, ultimate asset owners as well, combine, we can help companies behave in the right way, have the right values, exhibit the right cultures. And I think with that sort of stakeholder balance, there's a much greater chance of us moving forward successfully. And time is of the essence, as you know, so we need to get it right quickly. We can't wait till the 2040s and have that sort of sudden J curve. That would not work.
Yeah, I really hope to see that action taking place very soon. And we always finish the Green Dream with this question: what is your favourite sustainable drink or snack?
I'm a big apple fan. I actually even grow some apples, and I've got a small wall in my garden, and I managed to put some apples along there. And I know for me, a good English grown apple, whether it's in your own garden or bought from the supermarket, where you know where it's come from, hasn't got any food miles, and I suppose it could be a snack or a drink. You could make it into a nice apple juice as well if you want. But apples are a great source for me of a daily snack.
Very refreshing too. Well, yes. Thank you very much for joining us, Angus, today.
Good. Nice to speak to you. Thanks, Natalie.